Shana Tova. When last we came together, it was dark, but healing sleep has brought us back together in the light. Our souls prepared to sense the day smells of the year now born, to seek their source through words and melodies, thoughts and hopes, and the reassuring presence of this gathering of our people. This is the day on which tradition has it judgment is determined for those neither wholly righteous nor wholly wicked. To affirm that tradition is to affirm the significance of our actions in the world, to take responsibility for what we have and have not done, for what we want to do, and for our weakness will not let us do. To judge ourselves as the judge of all the world might judge us. How terrifying, and yet how exhilarating. To believe that behind all the changes in the world, some permanent goals can still be sought. That behind all the conflicting falsehoods lie some values that we can identify as truth. Beneath the sunlight, we have come to search for the brightness of that truth about ourselves, about our people, about the land in which we live, about the work that we must do to burn off the haze which hides these truths from daily view. We are good people, and our failings often blind us to our goodness. Yet we are not so good as we would have ourselves believe, and we must seek the road between both exaggerations of our worth. It's not easy to judge ourselves, to judge our people, to judge our world. We may be too harsh, we may be too lenient, but the new year, in all its morning brightness, reminds us it is time to begin. Page 110.
Ma tovu alecha, Yaakov mishkenotecha, Yisrael v'ani berochastecha, avo ve'etecha, eshtachave elecha kodshecha, Be'yira
Let us recite the blessing for study together on page 112. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. If you'll turn forward to page 118, you'll find the inspiring words of our dear Rabbi, fellow Leo Becker, and good friend, Richard Levy. May his memory continue to be a blessing in our lives. Before I go to the market, I like to make lists. I look in the cupboards and see what is missing in short supply, or might add some delight to our family's life. Once in the market, I find my list helps me to avoid overlooking anything and being distracted by attractions on every side. In Elul, the month preceding Rosh Hashanah, I do the same thing. I take out my pocket calendar, look through every day of the waning year, and reflect on each day's events. Where did I fall short? What was missing in my actions? On what good qualities was I running low? What new actions would add some holiness to my life? I bring the list to Slichot and to services on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and compare its items to the specific sins in Al Chet. I remember the circumstances of each Chet, each mark I missed, each avon, each time I twisted the path God set before me, each pesha, each time I outwardly rebelled against what I knew was right. I think, too, about having composed my solitary list of sins by myself. When the Al Chet phrase says, the sins which we have sinned before you. It is an important reminder that I am part of a company of list checkers. The ruefulness and shame I feel are shared by others. We all stand lifanecha before you. We can face God with this list. God does not turn away, and we do not have to either. Page 121. Said Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Aberdichev, in every action we must regard our own body as the Holy of Holies, a part of the supreme power on earth. That is, as a manifestation of the divine. Whenever we lift our hands to do a deed, let us consider them to be God's instruments, together. Guard yourselves well. Take good care of your lives. Your word calls to us. Do not harm to yourself. Do not weaken or exhaust yourself. In gratitude for the gift of our bodies, we pray for a year of renewed health and replenished strength. May caring for our bodies become our daily practice. May we be attentive to our need for proper food, sleep, and exercise. Let no injury come to others through our acts or failure to act. But let our mitzvah be this, to build a just society in which care is a birthright and the blessing of health the responsibility of all. Baruch atah Adonai, rufei basar umafli la'asot. Page 142. Please rise. page 145. Hello, sun in my face. Hello, you who make the morning and spread it over the fields and into the faces of the tulips and the nodding morning glories and into the windows of even the miserable and the crotchety. Best preacher that ever was, dear star that just happens to be where you are in the universe, to keep us from ever darkness, to ease us with warm touching, to hold us in the great hands of light. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Watch now how I start the day in happiness, in kindness. Baruch atah Adonai Yotzer HaMeorot. Ahava Rabbah Avatanu. Adonai Eloheinu, Chemla Gedola V'Teira Chamalta Aleinu. Together. Love abundant, love unstinting. Our God, you have enfolded us in love. Tender compassion beyond all bounds, your precious gift. Our fathers and mothers gave you their trust and gave them Torah, laws by which to live. For their sake, teach us as well. Grace us with your guidance. Loving Father, merciful Mother of all of us, grant us clear understanding, that we may listen, learn, and teach, preserve, practice, and fulfill with love every lesson of your Torah. May learning your Torah light up our eyes. May our hearts embrace your mitzvot. Unite us in love and reverence for you, that we may never feel ashamed of our deeds. 150.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Vaed. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha bechol levavcha uvechol nafshecha uvechol meodecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi metzavecha hayom al levavecha Veshinantam levanecha, vedibarta bam, beshivtecha bebetecha, uvlechtecha vaderech, uvshochbecha, uvekumecha, ukshartam leot ayadecha, vehayu letotafot beinenecha, uktavtam, al mezuzot petecha uvisharecha leman tizkeru va'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'item kedoshim le'elohechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher hoseti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim Liot lachem lelohim ani Adonai Elohechem.
Let us read together at the bottom of page 163. Remember the stories of slavery, and you will never stop working for freedom. Remember their fear at the edge of the sea, and self-doubt will never defeat you. Remember when desperation turned to celebration, and you will never let go of hope. Remember the words of the Baal Shem Tov. Forgetfulness leads to exile. Remembrance is the secret of redemption.
Mi chamocha b'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, nor tehilot oseh. Shira chadasha shivachu geolim, leshimcha hosvat hayam, yachad kulam hodu, ve'himlechu, ve'ameru, Adonai yimloch le'olam vaed. Zor Yisrael, kuma bezrat Yisrael, uv'deichinu mecha, Yehuda v'Yisrael, go'aleinu Adonai tzavaot shemo, Kadosh Yisrael, Baruch atah Adonai, Kol Yisrael.
Page 166. Please rise.
Adonai, sefatai tiftach, ufi yagite hilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu ve'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor ve'hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Ve'konei Hakol, Ve'zocher Chasdei Havot ve'imahot, U'mevi Geula livnei v'neihem, Lema'an Shemo be'ahava. Zochreinu l'chaim, Melech hafetz b'chaim, v'chotzeinu b'sefer ha'chaim, l'ma'ancha Elohim ha'im, v'chotzeinu b'sefer ha'chaim, l'ma'ancha Elohim chayim. Melech ozer, u'moshiach u'magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham v'ezrat Sarah. Atah gibor leolam Adonai, mechayei hakol atah, Rav lehoshia morid atah. מחכה חיים בחסד, מחיה הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים דרכי חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בגבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה. מי כמוך אל הרחמים, זוכר יסורך לחיים ברחמים. ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל, ברוך אתה אדוני בחיי הכל.
Please be seated.
Some words to prepare us for Unatana Tokef, page 173. In our everyday lives, we live with an illusion of control. We guard our health by eating well, exercising, and getting regular checkups. We get ahead professionally by working hard and building effective relationships. At the liturgical moment of Unatana Tokef, we are forced to admit how profoundly our lives can be altered by random occurrences over which we have no control. A brain hemorrhage or a heart attack can come out of nowhere. A drunk driver can cripple or kill. A parent can have to bury a child. An organization's sudden economic reversals can unexpectedly result in layoffs or firings. A healthy pregnancy can end with stillbirth. A competent person can be unable to find work. A trusted marriage can collapse. A pandemic can strike, endangering my health and life, uprooting every part of the routine that brings me comfort and security. In my heart of hearts, I know that I have as little control as any other sheep in the flock. At the moment of Unatana Tokef, I know for a certainty that my life hangs in the balance. When these high holy days end, I may be lulled back into my false sense of security, the cocoon of my routine. But today, I feel my exposure, sense the danger inherent in life, re-encounter my mortality. My end is dust. I cannot control the unexpected blows that will affect my family, my job, my health, but I can control how I live with them. Tshuva, cultivating a spiritual life and returning to Torah. Tefillah, cultivating gratitude and connecting with transcendent values. And tzedakah, cultivating generosity and pursuing justice, will mitigate the bad in the decree. Tshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah will not stop stock market crashes, lung cancer, or the other blows that come our way, but they can radically transform how we are affected by those blows. Page 174.
Together on page 176. And so a great shofar will cry Tekiah. A still small voice will be heard. Angels in a whirl of fear and trembling will say, "Behold, the day of judgment, for they too are judged. In your eyes, even they are not blameless. All who come into the world pass before you like sheep before their shepherd. As a shepherd considers the flock when it passes beneath the staff, you count and consider every life. You set bounds, you decide destiny, you inscribe judgments."
Rosh Hashanah yikatenu, uyom Kippur yechatenu. Rosh Hashanah yikatenu, uyom Kippur yechatenu. Kama yarun v'chama mi ashkit umi etoraf mi shalev mi jaser mi ani umi ashir bi shepal umi yaron uteshuva utefila utsedaka ma'virin et roa hagezerah.
On page 178. On Rosh Hashanah, this is written. On the fast of Yom Kippur, this is sealed. How many will pass away from this world? How many will be born into it? Who will live and who will die? Who will reach the ripeness of age? Who will be taken before their time? Who by fire and who by water? Who by war and who by beast? Who by famine and who by drought? Who by earthquake and who by plague? Who by strangling and who by stoning? Who will rest and who will wonder? Who will be tranquil and who will be troubled? Who will be calm and who will be tormented? Who will live in poverty and who in prosperity? Who will be humbled and who exalted? Together on page 180. But through return to the right path, through prayer and righteous giving, we can transcend the harshness of the decree. You are everything that we praise you for, slow to anger, quick to forgive. You do not wish the death of sinners, but urge them to return from their ways and live. Until the day of death, you wait for them. You accept them at once if they return. Since you created us, you know our impulses. We are but flesh and blood. Together on 182. We who are mortal, our origin is dust, and so is our end. We wear out our lives to get our bread, like broken vessels, like withered glass, like a flower that must fade, a shadow moving on, a cloud passing by, mere dust on the wind, a dream that flies away. But for you, ever-living sovereign, time has no limits. Your presence, unbounded by days and years, is everywhere. A glorious mystery none can decipher. Your name is worthy of you, and you are worthy of your name, and our name you have linked with yours. We turn the page and rise.
נקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום ככתוב על יד נביאך וקרא זה אל זה ואמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוא כל הארץ כבוד
On page 214. Our God, divine presence whose path our ancestors walked, bless us now with words first bestowed on Israel in the time of Moses and Aaron, the threefold blessing given us through Torah that joins our hopes with theirs. Responsively, may you know God's blessings of shelter and care.
May it be so.
May you receive the light of God's kindness and grace.
May it be so.
May you see God's favor and goodness, and may you partake of God's peace.
May it be so.
Yevarechecha Adonai ve'yishmerecha Yair Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka Yisa Adonai panav elecha ve'yasem lecha shalom. Yevarechecha Adonai ve'yishmerecha Yair Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka Yisa Adonai panav elecha ve'yasem lecha shalom. Ve'yasem lecha shalom.
On page 215. To think the same way, to share the same opinions, this is not peace. Unity is not uniformity. True peace comes through the expression of differences, many perspectives, each offering a partial view of the truth. Shalom means wholeness. Only when we open ourselves to understand all sides of an issue will we attain peace. And so it is written, Torah scholars increase peace in the world. Through their disagreements, truth will emerge, and we will find shalom. I want to invite you now to spend a little bit of time in silence with what's in you, not inside this prayer book or any prayer book. Just a little bit of time to dig, acknowledge, excavate, reach, grow. Let's spend this time praying silently. Continue now on page 223. Please rise.
We are gifts and we are blessings. We are history in song.
We are hope and we are healing.
treasures of the past.
We are carriers of wisdom, not the first and not the last.
Vador, Vador,
Nagid God Lecha.
Vador, Vador, we protect this chain from generation to generation. Vador, Vador, these lips will praise your name. Looking back on the journey that we carry in our heart,
From the shadow of the mountain to the waters that would part.
we are blessed and we are holy. We are children of your way.
And the words that bring us meaning, we will have the strength to say.
Vador, Vador, Nagid God Lecha. Vador, Vador, we protect this chain from generation to generation. Vador, Vador, these lips will praise your name. Vador, Vador,
Nagid God Lecha.
Vador, Vador, we protect this chain from generation to generation. Vador, Vador, these lips will praise your name.
We continue now on page 223. Please rise. Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Kolenu.
Avinu Malkeinu, Almighty and merciful, hear our voice.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu Lefanecha.
Avinu Malkeinu, we have strayed and sinned before you.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chamol Aleinu v'al Olaleinu v'tapenu.
Avinu Malkeinu, have compassion on us and our families.
Avinu Malkeinu, Kale Dever v'cherev v'ra'av me'aleinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, halt the onslaught of sickness, violence, and hunger.
Avinu Malkeinu, Kale Kol Tsar u'mastin me'aleinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, halt the reign of those who cause pain and terror.
Avinu Malkeinu, Kodvenu b'sefer Chaim Tovim.
Avinu Malkeinu, enter our names in the book of lives well lived.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chadesh Aleinu Shana Tova.
Avinu Malkeinu, renew for us a year of goodness.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu va'anenu, ki ein banu ma'asim, aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed v'hoshienu.
Avinu Malkeinu, almighty and merciful, answer us with grace, for our deeds are wanting. Save us through acts of justice and love.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu v'anenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu v'anenu, Ken banu masim, Aseh imanu, Tzedakah v'chesed.
Aseyman uzdaka v'chesed ve'oshienu. Aseymanu tzedaka v'chesed. Aseymanu tzedaka v'chesed ve'oshienu. Avinu malkeinu, chonenu v'hanenu. Avinu malkeinu, chonenu v'hanenu, ki ein banu masim.
We continue with Seder Kriyat HaTorah, the service for the reading of the Torah.
Atanig little har Sinai, lelamed lemcha Torah u'mitzvot, bekolot uvakim alehem niglita, ubekol shofar alehem ufata, alehem ufata.
Allah Elohim Yitruah, Adonai bechol shofar, v'chatzotzrot v'chol shofar, Arivu yivnei HaMelech
In this scroll is the secret of our people's life from Sinai until now. Its teaching is love and justice, goodness and hope. Freedom is its gift to all who treasure it.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh v'norah Shemo. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh v'norah Shemo. Yalai la lai lai, yalai la lai lai, yalai la lai lai, yalalai, yalalai, yalai la lai lai, yalai la lai lai, yalai la lai lai, yalalai, yalalai, yalai la lai lai, yalalai, yalalai, yalai la lai lai, yalalalai. Shana Tova, Shana Tova, Shana Tova, Shana Tova.
You may be seated. We have arrived once again at the shore of this morning's Torah reading, still searching, years on now, for even one sympathetic character in this nightmare of a story. On many Rosh Hashanahs past, we've discussed all the options. Some suggest our hero is Abraham, a man of faith so strong and unquestioned that he was willing to sacrifice his son for his God. But I doubt many of us look upon that kind of wild-eyed faith as anything heroic. Some suggest our hero is God, who constructs this entire episode as a grand lesson in what is not wanted by the heavens, intervening at the last moment, sending an angel to stop the killing and establish human sacrifice as something belonging to the pagans, not the Jews. But I suspect you, like I, can think of at least a few less depraved methods for teaching that grand lesson than dragging father and son and silent mother, unseen but deeply felt, through 3 endless days of agony, all the way until the blade is lifted to commit the crime. God, quite frankly, comes across more as sadist than hero. And then there are those who see Isaac as the hero, dutiful, trusting, brave enough to question, which couldn't have been easy. But let's be clear, Isaac made a choice in this story, a choice to be powerless. We picture him as a defenseless child at the mercy of an imposing father, when all evidence is to the contrary. The Torah teaches that Abraham was already 99 years old when Isaac was born. So he is a very, very old man when he lifts that knife. We also know that Isaac was 37 when his mother dies, immediately following this episode in the Torah. And so some scholars teach that Isaac was already 37 atop that mountain. But even those commentators who suggest that he may have been younger still see him as a young man, not a child. After all, we do know one thing. He was physically capable of schlepping a load of firewood up a tall mountain, and Dad was already in his hundreds. A hero could easily have stopped the madness through a principled act of resistance. A story in search of someone to like, to be like, on this Rosh Hashanah, this day of judgment. After all, we now know a thing or two about child sacrifice, as the previously infinitesimal number of American children dying of COVID-19 has now crept over 500 and promises to rise much higher. Back in July, when 100 of those children were still alive, CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky protested at a Senate hearing, saying, "I think we fall into this flawed thinking of saying only 400 of the 600,000 deaths from COVID-19 have been in children. Children are not supposed to die." This is a story that has all sorts of Abrahams and Gods and Isaacs. Those who feel safe because they're vaccinated and have decided they're done being bothered with pandemic restrictions. Those who continue to malign the vaccines, even though the overflowing ICUs are almost entirely filled with unvaccinated people. Those who are using their political power deliberately to handcuff schools that are trying to protect their students. a story in search of someone to be like on Rosh Hashanah. The great Israeli poet, Yehuda Amichai, once wrote about this morning's story from the Torah. The real hero of the binding of Isaac was the ram, he wrote, who didn't know about the collusion between the others. He was volunteered to die instead of Isaac. I want to sing a memorial song about him, about his curly wool and his human eyes, about the horns that were so silent on his living head, and how they made those horns into shofars when he was slaughtered. Alas, there was a hero of this morning's Torah reading, the progenitor of the shofar. We will hear once again today. But there is no ram to volunteer to die in place of our children. Only the sound of the ram's horn from long ago, calling us to awaken, holding us to account. Our Torah reading comes from the book of Genesis, chapter 22, verses 1 through 19. If you'd like to follow along, you can find it in Hebrew and in English on pages 240 and 241. For the honor of the Aliyah on this Rosh Hashanah morning, it is my pleasure and honor to call forward our Baeck Temple President, Iris Weinman.
Tamod Iris bat Aliyah veYehoshua laliat haTorah.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai hamvarach leolam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai hamvorach leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
ויהי אחר הדברים האלה, והאלוהים נישא את אברהם. ויאמר אליו, אברהם? ויאמר, הנני. ויאמר, קח נא את בנך, את יחידך אשר אהבת, את יצחק. ולך לך אל ארץ המוריה, והעלהו שם לעולה על אחד ההרים אשר אומר אליך. וישכם אברהם בבוקר. ויחבוש את חמורו, ויקח את שני נעריו איתו, ואת יצחק בנו, ויבקע עצי עולה, ויקום וילך אל המקום אשר אמר לו האלוהים. ביום השלישי, ויישא אברהם את עיניו, וירא את המקום מרחוק. ויאמר אברהם אל נעריו, שבו לכם פה עם החמור, ואני הנער נלכה עד כה ונשתחווה ונשובה עליכם. ייקח אברהם את עצי העולה וישם על יצחק בנו, ויקח בידו את האש ואת המאכלת, וילכו שניהם יחדיו. ויאמר יצחק אל אברהם אביו, ואומר, אבי? ויאמר, הנני בני. ויאמר, הנה האש והעצים והיה הסלע עולה. ויאמר אברהם, אלוהים יראה לו הסלע עולה בני. וילכו שניהם יחדיו. ויבואו אל המקום אשר אמר לו האלוהים. ויבן שם אברהם את המזבח, ויערוך את העצים, ויעקוד את יצחק בנו, וישם אותו על המזבח ממעל העצים, וישלח אברהם את ידו, ויקח את המאכלת לשחוט את בנו, ויקרא עליו מלאך אדוני מן השמיים, ויאמר, אברהם, אברהם! ויאמר, הנני. ויאמר, אל תשלח ידך אל הנער, ואל תעש לו מאומה, כי אתה ידעתי כי ירא אלוהים אתה, ולא חסכת את בנך, את יחידך ממני. ויישא אברהם את עיניו, וירא, והנה איל אחר נאחז בסבך בקרניו. וילך אברהם ויקח את האיל, ויעלהו לעולה תחת בנו. ויקרא אברהם שם המקום ההוא אדוני יראה, אשר יאמר היום בהר אדוני יראה. ויקרא מלאך אדוני אל אברהם שנית מן השמיים, ויאמר בי נשבעתי נאום אדוני כי יען אשר עשית את הדבר הזה, ולא חסכת את בנך, את יחידך, כי ברך אברכך והרבה הרבה, את זרעך ככוכבי השמיים, וככל אשר על שפת הים. וירש זרעך את שער אויביו, והתברכו בזרעך כל גויי הארץ, עקב אשר שמעת בקולי. וישוב אברהם אל נעריו, ויקומו וילכו יחדיו אל באר שבע, וישב אברהם בבאר שבע.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Thank you. Shana Tova. It is no accident that we pray for our very lives while this Torah, our Eitz Chaim, our tree of life, is open before us. In so many of history's darkest times, our people have turned to the Torah as a beacon to show the way. The ancient rabbis called the Torah Oraita. That's the Aramaic word for light. The Torah is the light. There have been far darker times for our people, to be sure, and we can be grateful for the blessing of weathering this time as we are. But there have also been brighter times for our people, and so we are grateful for the blessings of Oraita, the light that emanates from this scroll, light that reaches from our shared home here into your home, light we need. For you who are battling illness and injury, let the holy sound that we are about to create from home to home reach into you, encourage you, strengthen you. May you know refuat haguf, recovery of body. For you whose brokenness resides in your souls, may you find that joining your voice with ours across all boundaries that would seem to separate us offers you an embrace that restores your trust in tomorrow and your confidence that you will not be alone. May you know refuat hanefesh, renewal of spirit. And for us all, separated by space, united in destiny, let us commit to journeying on through this moment of worldwide wilderness, assured of our common purpose, to bring healing by being safe, to bring caring by being compassionate, to bring light, to banish the dark. I invite you to lift your voice in song so that we might make one sound, our sound, for we know the power of its beauty. We join in praying for healing with the words of Misha Berach, found on page 245.
Misha Berach Avoteinu Mekor HaBracha bless the ones before us. Help us find the courage to make our lives
shebeirach imotenu mekor havracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Please rise now if you are able as we prepare to dress our Sefer Torah. Almost exactly 1 year ago, as we were drawing near to the arrival of the new Jewish year 5781, which ended last night, a member of our congregation stopped by the temple to bring me a gift. I wasn't there when he arrived, and so I found this waiting for me. I apologize if it feels a bit crass for this pulpit, but yes, 5780 sucked. Some things are actually better expressed indelicately. A year ago, we all welcomed the arrival of 5781 already 6 months into a pandemic. We knew the end was still far away, and yet we were ready, zealous for what the new year would bring. That is to say, we certainly never imagined for a moment that we would be gathering like this again to welcome the arrival of 5782. Of course, there were some other things we also never imagined before 5781. We never imagined a violent insurrection waged upon our nation's capital, ending our presumption of the peaceful transition of power that once secured our democracy and made this country a model for others. We never imagined seeing an unholy alliance of neo-Nazis, Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, QAnon believers, members of the vast, burgeoning right-wing network of militias and conspiracy theorists, rife with their love of fascism and their hatred of globalists. That is, us. Savaging police personnel, desecrating our congressional chambers and offices, and threatening the lives of our elected leaders, while being openly aided and abetted by some of those very elected leaders, some of whom spew their own hatred of Jews and others with impunity. Before 5781, we never imagined Jews being physically attacked just for being Jews outside an LA sushi restaurant by a bottle-throwing, pepper-spraying, pipe-wielding, hate-spewing, Palestinian flag-waving caravan. And let's be clear, we're not talking about all those who wave the Palestinian flag. And we are not suggesting that it's not proper, necessary even, to speak out against Israeli policies and actions when they defy our Jewish values. This is a congregation that has never been timid about calling for and working for an end to the Israeli occupation. But when opposition to actions of the Israeli government serves as anyone's justification for verbally or physically attacking Jews, as happened numerous times here in Los Angeles and throughout the world this past spring, there is no name for that other than anti-Semitism. Another thing we never imagined, raising our sons and daughters to take their Jewish values into the public sphere, to partner for justice across lines of race and faith and gender and socioeconomics, only to find themselves unwelcome or unsafe in progressive circles when they wouldn't declare Israel to be a perpetrator of genocide, when they objected to Israel's multiracial Jewish citizenry being classified as white colonialists, when their critiques of Israeli actions fell short of disavowing Israel's right to exist. These are the stories brought to me by our LBT college students, young adults we helped you to raise, and to whom we feel responsible. In all of this, amid a backdrop of libertarianism run amok, such that poor countries all over the world are desperate for vaccine shots that Americans, citing liberty over community, refuse to take, even when paid to do so. And meanwhile, the climate of the planet rises unabated, and the fires multiply, and the hurricanes become more ferocious, and the future is filled only with greater and deeper questions. Maybe I need a new shirt now that 5782 is here. 5781 was a hard year to be a Jew. It was a hard year to be an American. And it was a hard year to be a human being. And as 5782 dawns, it's hard not to be demoralized, not to feel some measure of surrender, of fatalism about this moment of virus and violence and vitriol. In all the years I've served this congregation, I cannot remember a time when more of you have despaired about tomorrow. This is especially true of the youngest adults among us who openly wonder whether it makes much sense to give us older folks the grandchildren we've always dreamed of. And also the oldest among us, who have seen plenty of human history, including some very dark times. But nothing quite like this troubling confluence of traumas. In this country, we Jews are simply not accustomed, at least not recently, to this level of disquiet. So perhaps we can learn a thing or two from some fellow journeyers who are our friends in the Black community. The legendary blues guitarist B.B. King once spoke about what it felt like to build a forward-looking life underneath the endlessly dark cloud of lynchings and discrimination and disadvantage. He said, if you live under that system for so long that it don't bother you openly, but mentally, way back in your mind, it bugs you. Later on, sometime, you will think about this and you wonder why. So that's where your blues come in, because you hurt deep down. Believe me, I've lived through it. I know. I'm still trying to say what the blues mean to me, and so I sing about it. Is that not exactly what has brought us here in the warm morning light of 5782? Are we not here as a part of this beautiful congregation we love to sing about it, to give voice to all those realities that don't bother us openly all the time, but which sit at the backs of our minds, causing us to wonder why. That is these holy days, or it's supposed to be. We get to do that here, together. The landmark 20th century author of the African American experience, Richard Wright, wrote the following in his 1941 work, 12 Million Black Voices. Our churches are where we dip our tired bodies in cool springs of hope, where we retain our wholeness and humanity despite the blows of death. If your body is tired and you have felt something of our wholeness and humanity slipping away, well, you've come to the right place. Come, immerse yourself in the cool springs of hope. Hope, you say. From where do you harvest hope at a time like this? And I say, from those who have walked similarly dark roads, or even darker, sometimes much darker, in fact, and whose lives have testified to the majestic power of the human spirit. If we're looking for some kind of reasonable corollary for the magnetic draw toward despair so many are feeling in this moment, the closest we might get is 1968, a year that has inspired countless books and documentaries. Vietnam tearing a deep generational divide across the land, racial and cultural tensions reaching a boil, the violent chaos of the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, and, of course, the back-to-back assassinations of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Bobby Kennedy, the two men most commonly seen as the reason for hope. With disillusionment and dread in the air, this congregation's founding rabbi, Leonard Bierman, of blessed memory, stepped to this very podium on Yom Kippur Eve, October 1st, 1968, and he spoke these words. I believe with perfect faith that this time of turbulence is a time of great hope for humanity, not for despair and cynicism, but for hope. I draw hope from young people all over the world, and especially here in our own country. Yes, they are romantic and unrealistic and immoderate and unpredictable. They have respect for some of our ideals, but they are justly suspicious of our ability to realize the values we have taught them. They are looking not for values to talk about, but to live by. I draw hope from them. And, said Rabbi Bierman, I draw hope from being a Jew, from being part of a tradition that commands me to imagine a world as it should be, and then asks me to dream, because there are still dreams worth having. And more than that, to advance confidently in the direction of my dreams. Thoreau was not a Jew, but he once wrote a passage that many of us learned as schoolboys. If you have built castles in the air, your work need not be lost. That is where they should be. Now put the foundations under them. This synagogue, the whole of Jewish tradition, is where we turn to build castles in the air. Then we must go forth into the city, and there we must put foundations under those castles we envisage here. Now, one might wonder how this temple's rabbi could have been so certain of hope in a moment that felt so desperate to almost everyone else. But we must remember that Rabbi Bierman had his own sources of inspiration. He too counted upon those who had walked still darker roads and yet somehow remained bearers of light. Every now and then I'm asked why we are Leo Baeck Temple. After all, we didn't start that way. This congregation was founded as Temple Beth Aaron in 1948, hiring a freshly ordained Leonard Bierman as its spiritual leader 1 year later. But in 1952, Rabbi Bierman asked Leo Baeck, the great rabbi who had helmed all of German Jewry during the Nazi reign, if he would consent to the temple being named in his honor. And in fact, he came to LBT for the dedication ceremony. Baeck was much more than a great rabbi and theologian. He was one of the true heroic figures of the Holocaust. As a dignitary, he was offered multiple opportunities to escape Germany, refusing them all and remaining in Berlin until there were no Jews left there for him to serve. This landed him at the age of 69 in the Nazi camp at Theresienstadt, where he was subjected to hard labor, pulling hearses that were used as food carts. Incredibly, he survived, something that cannot be said for many of his loved ones, for whom he sought and accepted no special favors. Baeck lost 4 sisters in Theresienstadt and 2 brothers in a Nazi death camp elsewhere. And yet all of this barely scratches the surface of his story during the war. For Rabbi Leo Baeck saved lives in that camp by saving spirits. He was a pastor, performing funerals to ensure that each individual life and death retained honor. He performed weddings in the camp. Think about the message of that for a second. Most famously, he delivered lectures to audiences packed into freezing cold barracks late at night. Such was the hunger for hope. My teacher, Dr. Michael Meyer, published a new book on the life and thought of Rabbi Baeck this past November. It includes this remembrance of Baeck's lectures by fellow survivor Trudy Simonson. "Those 2 hours," she said, "were as if I were in a university and not a camp. You submerge yourself so much in the spiritual that you forgot you were freezing, that you were hungry and standing in an ice-cold attic." For his part, Baeck was similarly sustained by those he taught. He wrote, "Is there another such people on earth which has such a deep and true connection to the Spirit that although it is facing humiliation and danger, it asks for the word of the philosopher?" The text of only one of Leo Baeck's concentration camp lectures survived. But oh, what a lecture it was. Entitled, "The Writing of History," Rabbi Baeck spoke these words to a packed attic of starving listeners on June 15th, 1944. For the Israelite Jewish historiography, justice is the ultimate meaning of history. Were justice to perish, it would be meaningless any longer to live on earth. True history is the history of the spirit, of the human spirit, which may sometimes seem powerless, but which in the end remains superior, which survives because even if it does not possess power, nonetheless, it possesses strength that can never cease. From where Do I harvest hope in a moment like this? From knowing that we stand in a long and unbroken chain of Jews who did not know what tomorrow would bring and had good reason to worry in some cases whether there would even be a tomorrow, and who leaned upon the superiority of the human spirit. For even when they did not possess the power to reverse the dangers that troubled them, they nonetheless possessed the strength that can never cease. And so do we. I draw hope from our young people in this moment, romantic and unrealistic and immoderate and unpredictable as they are, as we once were. They are demanding their day to write the story of the human spirit, and even when they challenge or defy or reject our way, our answers, they provide renewed hope of unlocking the questions. I take hope in being a Jew, in this tradition which has assembled us once again, even from separate domiciles, to issue its unrelenting New Year's message. Go and build your castles in the air, especially when the air is particularly dark. And never rest until you've placed foundations under them. For we are part of a people whose connection to the Spirit is so deep and true that you are sitting in front of a screen right now, just so you can feel it brush across your soul and bring you into communion with hundreds, thousands of fellow seekers who have answered the call of yet another year by asking for the word of the philosopher. Our bodies may be tired, yes, but we know where to find the cool springs of hope. Most of all, I harvest hope from you, all of you, who have the blues and have come here to sing about it. I want to tell you that the year 5781, now ended, was one of this congregation's most inspiring. I watched you create community in too many ways to count, when you couldn't even leave your homes. I watched you provide comfort and cultivate joy. I watched you bring food to the hungry, deliver companionship to the lonely, give generously to the needy, and advocate for the disadvantaged. You submerged yourself so much in the spiritual that you forgot you were freezing. And this is why I have perfect faith that whatever the year 5782 may bring, even those things we won't have imagined, we will be ready to meet the moment. This season is for summoning all those questions which sit at the backs of our minds, causing us to ask why about ourselves, about our people, about our country, about our world. They're hard questions to ask, even harder questions to answer. To those questions, let the sound of the shofar point the way. Amen. Continue with Seder Tkiyat Shofar, the service for the sounding of the shofar. We have, of course, in our congregation a beautiful ritual for this part of the service that has been precious to our congregation for many, many years. And so the special supplemental material is where we'll be looking for our shofar service. We'll be continuing in the supplement on page 5. With the first section of the shofar service, Malchuyot, reflections on the mystery of creation. These are the classic patterns, and this is the weaving of human living, of whose fabric each individual is a part. And of all parts of this fabric, let this be borne in mind. Each is intimately connected with the bottom of the extremist reach of time. Each is composed of substances identical with the substance of all that surrounds one, both the common objects of one's regard and the hot centers of stars. All that each person is and experiences and shall never experience, in body and in mind. All these things are differing expressions of that person and of one root, and are identical. And not one of these things nor one of these persons is ever quite to be duplicated, nor replaced, nor has it ever quite had precedent. But each is a new and incommunicably tender life, wounded in every breath, and almost as heartily killed as easily wounded, sustaining for a while without defense the enormous assaults of the universe. So that is how it can be that a stone, a plant, a star can take on the burden of being, and how it is that a child can take on the burden of breathing, and how through so long a continuation and culmination of the burden of each moment, one on another, does any creature bear to exist and not break utterly to fragments of nothing. These are matters too dreadful and fortitudes too gigantic to meditate long and not forever to worship together. And I have felt a presence that disturbs me with a joy of elevated thoughts, a sense sublime of something far more deeply interfused, whose dwelling is the light of setting suns, and the round ocean and the living air and the blue sky, and in the mind of man, a motion and a spirit that impels all thinking things, all objects of all thought, and rolls through all things. In this first section of the shofar service, we acknowledge God's sovereignty with the words and special melody of the great Aleinu. If you're able, please rise at this time.
Aleinu leshabeach ladon hakol latet gedula Shelo asanu kegoye ha'aratzot velo samanu kemishpechot ha'adama Shelo sam chelkeinu kahem vegoraleinu Kechol hamonam
Asher kirishanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lishmoa kol shofar. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shehecheyanu v'kimanu v'higihanu lazman hazeh. Tkiya Shvarim Trua Tkiya Shvarim Tkiya Trua Tkiya.
You may be seated. On page 7. Let us go back. We shall search for the roots and causes. Buried under the thick incrustation of everything we are, buried beneath the accumulation of memory, lust, greed, love, kindness, there lurks the something out of which we have oozed. There is a way out of our confusion, a way illumined by reason, governed by compassion. Out of our tradition, out of Bible, Midrash, Talmud, comes leaping 1,000 familiar words. It has been told thee, O man, what is good and what Adonai doth require of thee, only to do justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly with thy God. What is hateful to thee, do not do unto thy fellow. Adonai of hosts is exalted through justice. Seek justice through justice. These words and countless others speak for all the redeeming moments of grandeur in human life. But memory brings other discoveries as well. I shall tell you of redeeming moments of grandeur. I shall tell you of horror and wrath etched into the past and burned into the present by people's barbarism, arrogance, and stupidity. I shall tell you of cool detachment and moral sterility and the enormities they sanction. Search where you will, back into time and tradition and conscience, but it is always the same. It will always be the same. That is why we sound the shofar today, to remind us that our world and its people, you and I, need desperately to be made whole. Our world needs Jews. It needs troubled people, men and women who care, men and women who are not ashamed to be sensitive and tender. It needs those who are willing to become members of a community dedicated to each other's fulfillment, aware that without such a community, it will be afraid of all the forces which have removed our humanity, which have cut us off from the unity which is humankind, the creation we were formed to guard, and the God whose Spirit has made us persons. It is to such a challenge that the new year comes in all its morning brightness, in all of its persistent hope. Please rise if you're able.
Tkiya Shvarim Trua Tkiya Shvarim Tkiya Trua Tkiya
Everything on this earth follows the age-old rules. When spring comes, the ice melts. And when someone is enraged, he does evil. And yet no rule or law can keep us from dreaming that one day all this travail will turn to ashes, and that you, O my God, playful and senseless, great and powerful, will cause a new rule to blossom forth under your breath, and the miracle will spread across the earth. I dream that one time, just one time, in a winter's landscape between snow and ice, you will allow a tree to bloom forth in red blossoms. That one time, just one time, for one night, the stars in the skies will dance. And that one time, just one time, one day, the evil one will do good. How glorious it would be were your will written throughout the world through your deeds. See, the world is a dark pit, and men haltingly stumble and falter from abyss to abyss, from battle to battle. They aim for the good and commit the evil. They do evil and regret it. They think about what they have wrought and tear their own flesh. And they are full of errors and full of lies, and everything has its reason and its cause. Also the evil has its cause. Also the lie has its cause. Also the errors have their cause. And everything goes its way, according to the age-old rules and laws. And yet I pray for a miracle. I pray for many miracles, a rain, a storm of miracles that will sweep down over humankind. May at last the evil one's hand, as he lifts it to beat another, be paralyzed. May at last the man who opens his mouth to speak an evil word, may he be stricken with silence. Oh my God, we know what has passed, and we know what will come, and we can only dream of your boundless might. And you never let go of the rules which you created. Deny yourself, my God, and create yourself anew. I am so very tired of the age-old rules and laws, of all the causes and the reasons. And I pray for the miracle to happen with the sound of trumpets and thunder and lightning. Together, on that day, a great shofar shall be sounded, and they shall come who were lost in the land of Assyria, and they who were cast away in the land of Egypt, and they shall worship Adonai on the holy mountain in Jerusalem. Adonai shall be revealed to them, and God's arrows shall go forth as lightning. Adonai shall sound the shofar, and shall proceed in the whirlwinds of the south. Then shall be heard once more in the cities of Judah and in the open places of Jerusalem the sound of joy and the sound of gladness, the sound of the bridegroom and the sound of the bride. If you're able, please rise.
Tekiah, Shvarim Teruah, Tekiah, Tekiah, Shvarim, Tekiah, Tekiah, Teruah, Tekiah Gedolah.
Avinu Malkeinu, eternal source of love and direction, we are assembled as one to greet this new year with new eyes, aware as never before of the inextricable link that binds all of humanity as one. As people throughout the world pray, each in their own way, for health and safety, for an end to the plague uniting us all, our voices in this holy community merge in prayer for our country, for our land of Israel, and for the entirety of the human family. For all three face a profound moment of truth as our new year arrives. May our commitment to our country and our choice of its leaders reflect the moral character we see in ourselves, for the destiny of our nation is squarely in the hands of all its citizens. May our people's ancient home turn toward the light of justice, compassion, and human dignity, and away from the darkness of oppression and violence, so that all who are bound to this land of holiness will know hope, peace, and liberation from despair. And Eternal One, let this new year be a time of worldwide healing, with the cries of those of every race and belief in near and distant lands reaching our hearts and calling us into responsibility. Cause us to see and remember the earth's oppressed, who suffer the most from impoverishment and hunger, powerlessness, and pandemic. The hammer of chaos beats loudly in our time. May we sanctify our lives by being among those who kindle light in every dark valley of humankind. And let us say together, Amen.
Amen.
We return to our prayer books for Aleinu, page 286.
לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמענו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר ואדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד, ושמו אחד, ושמו אחד.
Shana Tova. I am Iris Weinman, and I am honored to be serving as president of Baeck Temple. Just want to give you a few updates on what's happening after our morning service today. We will be proceeding with our Tashlich service today at 5 o'clock at Will Rogers State Beach, Lifeguard Tower number 7, which is where Pacific Coast Highway meets Temescal in Pacific Palisades. It's actually tonight, so hopefully none of you went yesterday. I apparently misspoke yesterday and said it was yesterday. As the sun goes down this evening, our LBT community will venture to the beach for a service where we symbolically cast off our sins in the form of throwing breadcrumbs into the ocean. After the service, please join us for a bring-your-own picnic dinner and a beautiful evening at the shore. This is a wonderful opportunity for us to safely be together in person as a community, so you don't want to miss this one. On Friday, September 10th is Shabbat Shuvah, our special Sabbath of repentance and the first Shabbat of the new year. Services will be at 7:30 p.m., and our longtime congregant and board member, Richard Marks, will be giving the Dvar Torah. If you have not had an opportunity to attend in the past, it is a not-to-be-missed Shabbat. You are welcome to join us either in person or via live stream. Our Erev Yom Kippur services next week will be on Wednesday, September 15th. Our evening will begin with the family service, in person and streaming at 5:30 p.m. We will join together for a community candle lighting by Zoom at 7 o'clock p.m., followed by the streaming of our Erev Yom Kippur Kol Nidre service at 7:30. Yom Kippur morning services on Thursday, September 16th will begin with our family service at 8:30 a.m., in person and online, and then our main sanctuary service will begin streaming at 9:30. At 11:30 a.m., our children's service, geared to those aged 8 and younger, will be held on our campus. Thereafter, we will have the opportunity to study together on Zoom with a special session led by fellow LBT congregant, Professor Stephen Ross, exploring the roots and development of contemporary anti-Semitism, and a discussion about where we go from here to combat it. The study session will be followed by an opportunity to experience a beautiful musical meditation, either in person on our campus or online, before our afternoon services begin streaming at 4:30 p.m. In addition to all of these services, we have a whole host of other programming designed to elevate your High Holy Day experience. These include a special program for parents with Rabbi Bernie and Rabbi Ross on September 9th, a special break-fast edition of our sweet and spicy cooking classes on September 12th, and a special High Holy Day edition of Ken's Campfire to be offered both in person or online. Please check out our website or look for reminders via your email regarding all of these special offerings for the year. You will also soon be receiving information about a whole host of programs, worship opportunities, and opportunities to gather for Sukkot and Simchat Torah. Please don't forget to fill and bring back bags filled with non-perishable food for Sova. You may drop the bags off any Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. through Yom Kippur. So many in our city are in need, and we can make a difference. And finally, I want to remind you that LBT strives to be a 100% voting congregation. So for all you registered voters, please be sure to vote in the upcoming state election and let your voice be heard. On behalf of our Board of Trustees, our clergy, staff, and the entire LBT community, I want to wish you all a good and sweet new year, filled with many blessings of health, love, and joy. Shana Tova.
On the bottom of page 290, if some messenger were to come to us with the offer that death should be overthrown, but with the one inseparable condition that birth should also cease, if the existing generation were given the chance to live forever, but on the clear understanding that there never again would be a child or a youth or first love, never again new persons with new hopes, new ideas, new achievements, ourselves for always and never any others, could the answer be in doubt? When we fear death's decree, let this bring us solace. The memory of loved ones who have gone before us, a vision of generations to come through whom we reach far into the future, beyond our own lives. Alas, for those that never sing, but die with all their music in them. Let us treasure the time we have and resolve to use it well, counting each moment precious, a chance to apprehend some truth, to experience some beauty, to conquer some evil, to ease some suffering, to love and be loved, to achieve something of lasting worth. There is promise within each of us that only we can fulfill. Let us live our lives so that someday it will be true to say of us the world is a little better, because for just one moment, they lived in it. Our memories carry their lives into yet another year. We celebrate the inspiration that they still offer us with the words of the Mourner's Kaddish, found on page 292. If you're able, please rise. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chai echon u'v'yom echon, u'v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'v'zman kariv v'imru, Amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam u'lalmei almaya, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו. לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה תאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל, ואמרו אמן.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל.
Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, our God who binds us to those who preceded us and stretches our story out to those who will follow. Replenish our tired bodies and aching spirits in the cool springs of hope. For yes, we may have the blues, but we have come together to sing about it. And lifted by one another, our song will be one of strength that can never cease. We have castles to build in the air in this new year, 5782, and foundations to put beneath them. And if our courage should flag or our fears threaten to overcome us, we will remember this day when we submerged ourselves so much in the spiritual that we forgot we were freezing. From this, let us build our chapter in the history of the human spirit. Shana Tova.